everyone, and welcome to Oulton Park for round 7 and 8 of the Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Great Britain. We are very thankful you're able to join us for this one, as we have a couple of hours worth of fantastic action on the cards here. My name is M.Emery. I'm joined by the ever wonderful Paul Smith to commentate the action here at Oulton Park. Of course, a fantastic circuit here in Cheshire. It's always delivered excitement, at least with regards to the previous round that we had with regards to this track last season. We'll get into that a little bit later on. But how are you doing, Paul?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. It's going to be a tricky track to overtake at that we have. We've seen that in plenty of other series, but last year these drivers, they showed that you can overtake around here and even go pretty much a lap side by side. So hopefully we get more of that. And yeah, I cannot wait to see what comes today.
Yeah, I absolutely cannot wait either. Of course, we had a lot of drama coming out of the last event. We had a penalty be applied to Sebastian Joe for the incident that he caused in the race there, that sort of took Graham Carroll out of the event, sort of caused Pierre Berryman to fall a little bit further back through the, not Graham Carroll, excuse me, it was Pierre Berryman that got himself involved in that one. A couple other drivers involved as well, so it's a lot of, there were a lot of unhappy faces at the end of last week, but the stewards decided 15 seconds penalty is the appropriate punishment for Sebastian Joe. That does affect things slightly in terms of the championship. We'll get onto that a little bit later. But here's how today is going to work. Open qualifying is currently active, so 17 minutes. These drivers will have ample opportunity to get themselves their place on the starting grid for race number 1, which is going to be 25 minutes. Then, of course, we have a little bit of a break for 5 minutes, and then we go straight into race number 2, another 25-minute event, but with the top 6 reversed based on the results of race number 1. There's the point structure as well. Points all the way down to P15 here in this one. You get bonus points for pole position and the fastest lap in each race as well. And those could indeed matter, especially at the top of the order at the end of the season, because, you know, in a different country, of course, we had the Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Deutschland. That was only separated by a handful of points at the end. As we see, Kevin Ellis Jr., he currently leads the standings here with Graham Carroll and Sebastian Job P2, P3. Of course, Job on 100 points. He would have had a little bit more coming out of last week, but due to that penalty, does slide back through the order somewhat. Pierre Berryman, of course, hard to find any sort of luck so far this season.
Yeah, of course, involved in 2 incidents, one at Brands Hatch and then one last time out at Snetterton as well. But really key that Kevin Ellis Jr. now has a 15-point lead over Graham Carroll in the championship as we're getting close to the halfway point of the series. So yeah, it's really quite the challenge at the top of the standings, should I say. Get your teeth in full. Peter Berryman, though, he's had so much more pace than what that championship standing shows. It's been a couple of incidents that he's got involved with that's cost him dearly, and you know, at the end of the day, it's costing him the chance of a championship.
Yeah, it is. I definitely agree with your point there. Peter Berryman ideally should be a little bit closer to the front 3 than it looks right there. But that's the schedule on screen. Of course, we are coming towards the end of the first half of the season here at Oulton Park for race 7 and 8. Next week, we head to Knock Hill for the first time in Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Great Britain history. And we head back to Silverstone for the round on the 10th of April, then to Donington Park, and then to Brands Hatch once again, this time on the GP layout for our finale for race 15 and 16 of the championship. Certainly a good grouping of tracks to finish off the season here in this one. We don't go abroad from the UK perspective whatsoever this time around like we did last season. We're keeping everything in-house, shall we say. So there we go. That's the schedule to the end of the season. And of course, that will give us an opportunity here to have a little bit of a track guide with Will Chadwick. This is how to go fast around Oulton Park.
Hello there, my name is William Chadwick, driver of the 88 Team Fordzilla Porsche 992 GT3 Cup car, and welcome to the 4th track walk of the Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Great British Championship. Oulton Park is my home track, and I've been coming here almost all my life, watching BTCC, open wheelers, anything you name it, and I've even driven on it too. So it'd be really good to take you around here as we head into the first sector. Starting the lap, we head to turn number 1, Old Hall Corner. You need to get as much on the inside as possible, make the corner as open as possible, because if you run too wide on the exit, you're going to get an off track. It's incredibly strict on the off track, and that also goes as we pass Denton's, turn number 2, and into Cascades. You've got to use the camber on the inside to get right up against the curb and make sure you don't run wide again, as the off track is strict there as we head down towards Island Bend. As we round Island Bend and head into the Shell Oils hairpin, you'll notice that it is banked on the inside, and you want to stay close to the inside, make sure you get the exit up towards Britain's. As we come towards the end of the lap, we go over Clay Hill, through Water Tower, and into Druids Corner. Druids Corner is a double apex right-hander, which is absolutely crucial to nail as you head down into Lodge Corner, which is the final corner, and a fantastic passing opportunity for the race. After having a look at some of the more trickier sectors, join me on board for a lap of this historic and undulating circuit. Here we are for a lap in the Porsche 992 GT3 Cup car at Oulton Park International. We're going to keep far to the left-hand side, down towards turn 1, Old Hall Corner. Late apex, making sure you don't run wide on the exit, avoiding the 1X. Down towards Denton's, keeping it to the right-hand side, into Cascade. We're aiming to be in the camber on the red curbing, going to the outside, not using any of the exit. You will get a 1X there. Down through past Lakeside and into Island Bend, keeping it nice and tight around Island Bend, setting yourself up for the Shell Oils hairpin. Going to trail off into the Shell Oils hairpin as you go down into second gear, getting an exit, really good, towards Britain's. Keeping ourselves to the right hand side, aiming ourselves into Britain's, getting as close from the left as possible, flick it right, up over Hilltop towards Hislops. We're looking at the braking boards, braking just before the 100-metre board, down into Hislops, close to the right-hand barrier, tight around the left hand, and through Knickerbrook we go, making sure that we don't get a 1X on the exit, pulling it back tight. We now head towards Clay Hill, over Clay Hill, towards Water Tower, keeping it left at Water Tower, down to 4th gear at Druids, first apex, second apex, fighting it on the exit, and down towards the final corner, which is Lodge. On the brakes near the turning sign, through the final corner, shift into 3rd gear, up through Deer Leap, and that is a lap at Oulton Park International Circuit. Thank you so much for joining me for the 4th track walk of the Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Great British Championship. Hopefully I'll get a good result today. I'll see what I can do. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the racing.
Well, thank you very much, Will, there from Team Fordzilla. We'll be tracking his progress so far this race, considering, like you said, it is his home track, so should be on for a good result here today. We've got our track conditions up on screen for you now. 21 degrees in the air, 38 degrees on track, which is relatively warm by UK standards. Partly cloudy with a moderate wind. So things should be, well, have a little less grip out there, considering how the tyres can have a couple of problems when the track temperature gets a little bit too high, Paul. But it's not the highest we've ever seen, it's just high for the UK.
It is certainly high for the UK, and I've been to Oulton Park so many times, and it's been the choice of either sunscreen or waterproofs that I've had to take to this venue. It is a magnificent place. If you ever get the opportunity to go watch some racing, then head on down to Oulton Park, because it is fantastic. And of course you can watch the Porsche Carrera Cup Great Britain as part of the British Touring Car package at Oulton Park, along with all the other tracks that the series runs at. So yeah, get yourselves down to Oulton Park, it's fantastic. There you go. Do you think that's it? Do you think I'll get a job with them and get some money for that sales pitch?
Yeah, I think if the Oulton Park marketing department is watching, then Paul's your man. Apparently, it's just basically promoted your product for free there. But there we go, as we watch qualifying continue on its way. We've got ourselves Sebastian Job, currently provisional pole position at the moment with his with his championship competitors basically directly behind him. As Kevin Ellis Jr. and Peter Berryman down to P3, of course. No Graham Carroll, at least within the top grouping at the moment. He's down in P7, so Carroll hoping for a little bit of a better latter part to the session to get him up amongst those top spots. We know he's certainly capable of doing so. He just hasn't strung a comfortable lap together at this point, it seems.
It is a tricky track to get absolutely right, and as Will pointed out in his track guide there, if you go too far wide, you can very easily pick up a 1x instant point. For those of you who've never watched an iRacing broadcast and you're thinking, what on earth is he going on about with 1x's? Well, the iRacing safety system, if you go off track, you accumulate 1 incident point, and if during the race you accumulate too many instant points, you get a drive-through penalty. In qualifying, it nullifies your qualifying lap that you are on, so you do have to be careful of the track limits around here, and Jonathan Palmer is very keen on keeping his grass nicely kept, nicely mowed.
Yeah, we can't be having any rallycross out there. I'll be very unhappy, and the groundskeepers will be very unhappy as well. But for the moment, 6.5 minutes left to go in qualifying. This is a very important race for Sebastian Job, knowing that he got that penalty coming out of last week. You know he's a good couple of points adrift of the top of the order at the moment. And anything but a race win here would be a disappointment for Sebastian Job, I feel.
Yeah, and this is a track that he goes well at as well. You know, he's driven around this track in full metal racing in the Formula Ford 1600 scholarship that he was in a couple of years ago. So he knows his way around this track, both in the sim and in real life. And he always seems to go well at this track. But it's a track that a lot of the drivers really enjoy. Back in the 90s, Joachim Winkelhock, when he joined British Touring Cars in 1993, he actually called this place a mini Nürburgring because of the undulations, because of the tree-lined nature of the track, and you can see why from on board Pete Berryman's view right now.
It's a super fun track. It's a super fun track to get a race start at as well, because they're starting up the hill on the way towards the start-finish line, so it's tricky to get the traction down. So it's tricky to start these cars at the best of times, Paul, with the whole clutch model, the way that it works in iRacing. But add that sort of elevation, starting on an incline to it, we might be seeing some relatively intriguing starts today.
It depends on where you are on the grid. If you're in the front few rows of the grid, it's not too bad. You're on the level, but if you're towards the rear, you can be pointing at the sky out of the loop, so it can be a bit trickier there. But the front few rows of the grid, they shouldn't be too bad for the start. Pete Berryman did find himself a little bit of extra time on that last lap, put himself in second place. But look at that, 0.2 of a second. That is a big gap in this series from what we've been seeing throughout this championship so far.
Yeah, Sebastian Job, incredible pace at the moment, and it doesn't seem like anyone's able to challenge, at least into these final couple of minutes. It's also, there's the element of the track getting a little bit more worn in and heated up a little bit with the whole iRacing dynamic surface as well, so the track might not necessarily be at its fastest at the moment, which is why you're not seeing too much movement in terms of the times on the left-hand side of your screen. But we'll have to wait and see, and for this time to run out, of course, you see Josh Thompson there just towards the driver's left-hand side on the run down the straight there. But yeah, this is, well, at least everyone's got themselves qualifying times on the board. Yeah, everyone from Sebastian Job down to Daniel McDonald has set themselves a time, so we won't be having any disappointments with that regard this time around. But in terms of the 1 second gap here, 1 second all the way down to P12. But yeah, there's again, it's just the biggest gap between two drivers, I get the feeling, is between P1 and P2 at the moment. Yeah,
certainly Job has just hooked that lap up, hasn't he, and he's done a really, really good job of it. I will say, Will Chadwick has really picked up, and you can tell it's his home track is this? Because he's in 4th place at the moment, ahead of a few World Championship drivers, so he's really staking a claim for this one. M.Emery as well, coming down towards Lodge Corner, and you go plunge downhill, then back uphill. I've actually walked on the track here. I've never driven around it, but I've walked on the track here, and the undulation is just incredible around here. You certainly get yourself fit if you go for a walk of a lap.
Yeah, it's like trying to walk around a mini version of Spa, I suppose. Yeah, that's not that I've done either. Let's just say that.
I've done both.
Yeah, quite a workout. But yeah, Oulton Park's such a fun track. Of course, in the UK, home to British Touring Cars, British GT, British Superbike, and Formula 3. So yeah, it's definitely on a lot of seasons calendars, and for good reason. To get some decent racing. Here's Jamie Moon. Hops get the jump through the chicane at Britain's and across the hilltop. He goes on the 75 car. Currently in 6th place for the moment, and well, only about a 10th of a second shy of Josh Thompson. I'm getting my words in the right order at some point. It's just like my mouth is just full of foam at the moment for some reason. But there we go. Jamie Moon heading his way through now. Again, there shouldn't be too much opportunity to improve laps at the end of this session. I think it seems like most of the fast laps that we saw were very, very early on.
I mean, we saw Blair Mann move up to 10th place a moment or two ago, so there is still some time in the track there. It's just getting it down. I mean, Graham Carroll, that's the big surprise. I mean, half a second off of his teammate, but in 7th place. That's just a real shock for me in this qualifying. You listed off all the championships that run here. You also forgot about the Gold Cup event as well, which is for historic racing. Thoroughly enjoyable weekend. I suggest you go and watch that as well if you like some old motor cars. Here comes Graham Carroll. Forget old motor cars, this is a brand new one. That's a better lap time, and that moves him up to 2nd place. That's more like it for Graham.
But it completely threw out the window what I said with the track being past its best. It seems like Graham Carroll has put together a fantastic lap there right at the very dying moments as well. Remember, since this is a heat racing session from the iRacing perspective, once the timer expires, the drivers will not get themselves an opportunity to complete their lap. So that was the very last opportunity for Graham Carroll to get something done, and he does deliver. It's an Oracle Red Bull Racing Esports 1-2 front row lockout for them, with Pierre Berryman and Alice Jr. making it an all Apex Racing team 2nd row.
And they're not going to finish this lap either, as you pointed out. You've really got to be careful of those tyre stacks in both chicanes, because they really can catch you out and cause you significant damage. But qualifying is all done.
Yep, qualifying over and done with. There we go. Pierre Berryman realizing that's, well, not going to be able to complete that lap. So we do have a starting grid then for race number 1 here today at Oulton Park. We're very thankful you're able to join us not only on the RaceBot TV channel, but of course on the Porsche Twitch as well. Here's the starting grid then. Sebastian Joe P1 with Graham Carroll on that front row with him as well. 2nd row goes to Apex Racing team Peter Berryman and Kevin Ellis Jr. with Will Chadwick's team Fordzilla car in 5th place. Let's see what he can do for that. He's quote-unquote the best of the rest as far as championship is concerned at the moment, with Josh Thompson in P6. Further back, you got Jamie Moon in the Team 75 car by Sim RC in P7, with NX Racing's Jack Cedric in P8. Will Chigurtha, P9 for Williams Esports with Delta Sports for U4K. Matt Emery in P10. Pure Sims' Blair Mann starts in P11 with, well, making it an all Pure Sims at row 6 with Leon Penn in P12. Brandon Blakesley starts in P13 for Vulcan with Thomas Cope Olympus in P14. Craig Williams in his own Craig Setup Shop car in P15 with Dane Bed for Apex in P16. Lewis Wall from the Craig Setup Shop team also in P17 with Apex's Daniel McCauley rounding out the 18th spot on the starting grid. Our privateer, Daniel McDonald, will start in 19th here today for race number 1. We've just got shy of 2 minutes before we get ourselves our racing underway for the first time at Oulton Park for this season. And, well, what a qualifying performance it was for those Red Bull Racing Esports guys at the front. They really needed that, especially Seb.
Yes, absolutely. Graham Carroll, though, he wants to get a championship here, don't forget. He'll be wanting to try and get the jump on Sebastian Job here in this race. But you can see that grid. So as you mentioned, Connery, there is an incline towards the back of the grid, but that front sort of 6-7 rows is nice and flat for these drivers, so they don't need to worry about that. One driver has been struggling to get to grips with the racing here is Leon Penn. He's been in and around that mid-pack all the way through the series and just getting involved in a few incidents here and there, so he'll be looking for a better run of things. Craig Williams, I mean, he's always one for a few laughs, isn't he? He's down in 15th, and he'll be just trying to move forward in this field as well. But everybody's gridding up here, getting themselves ready for the first race of 2 today.
I remember pole position starts on technically the outside coming in towards turn number 1, but of course it is a staggered grid, and well, it's going to require a monster start for Graham Carroll to be able to get a nose ahead in towards turn number 1. Let's see what the Apex Racing team can do from row number 2 as well. We've got Will Chadwick on the outside looking in. It's his home circuit. Let's see if that pays dividends as we get ourselves race number 7 of the Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Great Britain underway at Oulton Park. And off and away down in towards turn number 1 we go as Sebastian Job able to swing his way in towards the race lead. Kevin Ellis Jr. and Pierre Berryman, the lineups 3rd and 4th on the way in towards Stenton and towards Cascades for the first time. Very clean start from the very front of the field. Everyone getting themselves single filed out relatively quickly here. It seems like it's been a very, very comfortable start for pretty much everyone as we head our way in towards the Island Bend and down in towards turn 5 hairpin for the first time. That is a very, very nice start from everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Through Shell they go. Josh Thompson managed to gain a position at the start into turn 1, got inside of Will Chadwick, and Will had to just take a little bit to the grass, so lost that position. Craig Williams involved in an instant, as is Lewis Ward. And that's his teammate, and he's stuck at the tyre wall.
He's stuck on top of the tyre wall. That is crazy. I have to look back and see what happened. I think it was caused by an incident involving Dane Baird, I believe it was. Dane Baird, I don't think Dane really had anything to do with causing that. It's just Lewis Ward going for a little lateral gap that didn't exist and turned himself across the nose. But we will get another look at it in just a few moments. In fact, right now you can see it right there. Spins that Craig setup shop up into the tyre barrier on the inside of the Apex, one of the turns at Britain's. And that's an embarrassing way for Lewis Ward to end the first race of the day.
Certainly is, and hardly ideal for the Craig Setup Shop team as well, it must be said, because of course Craig Williams got involved in that innocent party in that incident. But lap number 2 already, and Sebastian Job's got a little bit of a gap over Graham Carroll, so he's pulled out a little bit of space. Ellis Jr., Pete Berryman are keeping Carroll honest in all of this. Ellis Jr. right now needs to just focus on getting himself some good points and minimising the amount of points that Graham Carroll gains over him in this first race, because of course that front 6 does get inverted for the second race.
It does. So that one, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, shall we say. But you can see at the front of the field, Joe continuing to extend that gap. It seems like he has the best of the clear air pace compared to everyone at the moment. That was certainly indicative in qualifying, and it might end up being a very comfortable race one for Sebastian Job if he's able to continue on his form. It seems like the battle will be developing for P2 and back as the race leader starts to run away. Here's the ride on the back of Graham Carroll, though, looking back to Kevin Ellis Jr. in the number 98. Ellis Jr. back end out, and well, I think Palmer will have something to say about that with cross cutting.
Well, it's very easy to do that at Druids, it must be said. Oh, Ellis Jr. again running wide over the grass. All sorts out of shape out of Lodge Corner. and he's really pushing, isn't he? He's really putting a lot of energy through his car early on. Now he's got to be careful not to pick up too many off-track penalties, because that does affect his running and his standing in the race. Post-race, of course, any stewards' decisions are made post-event. Ellis Jr. just needs to get in that rhythm and just get himself into a nice routine.
Does, and well, I think the time is of the essence a little bit. At least that's what Kevin Ellis Jr. is feeling at the moment. He feels like he needs to get up to fight Sebastian Loeb as quickly as possible. Of course, Graham Carroll's still very much in the championship, of course. We can't discount him, you know, with his current situation. But for Kevin Ellis Jr., it's basically him versus the Red Bull Racing Esports teammates ahead for the moment. He's not coming under any threat from behind because the car behind him is M.Emery, his teammate. So Berryman's not going to be in too much of a rush to press forwards if he knows that his teammate could potentially make moves. And Berryman's task would then be to follow in Ellis Jr.'s tyre tracks.
He could well do that, and Berryman, you know, I think he'll realise even at this stage of the championship, he'll still push on and try and get some results, because you can never write off what will happen in this championship. But I think he'll realise that it is going to be a tough task to win the championship, so maybe support his teammate out there. So yeah, gonna be interesting to see how the dynamics of this one pan out with 20 minutes or 5 minutes into this race already. The thing is, Carroll has been able to hang on to the coattails of Sebastian Job at the front. I thought Job was going to be trying to pull away after gaining that 4/10 on lap 1, but it's stabilised at that gap now, and he's not really moving away from his teammate as we look further back at Jack Sedgwick.
Could it be that Graham Carroll's just told Job just to back off of it a little bit so he still maintains the slipstream at some points in the circuit to help him defend from Ellis Jr.?
It's not the biggest slipstreaming track around here. The only places that you really feel it will be down towards the end of into the braking zone here, down into Hislops, and even then you don't have the greatest effect in that. Oh, Will Tregurtha getting on the grass, that's cost him dearly because Sedgwick is alongside him up Clay Hill, and that's going to be the inside for Sedgwick into Druids.
It is inside for Lodge if required as well, but Jack gets it done through Druid's corner and doesn't require any fighting through turn 16. So Will Tregurtha falling back here. We've got JB Moon, slightly defensive line to try and keep M.Emery behind him as they head their way through Lodge and up the hill through the DLE and across the start-finish line. They go for coming on towards lap number 5 of this event. Of course, we got, at least at the front, we got ourselves William Chadwick in E6. So he's going to be our reverse grid pole position sitter at the moment if things finish as they are right now. So the hometown kid should be getting himself starting at the very front. At the very end of this, coming in towards race number 2. But we will have to wait and see as we're riding on board with M.Emery. 2 cars ahead. That is Jamie Moon, Will Tregurtha, and well, I guess you can count Jack Sedgwick in that one as well. 3 cars ahead.
Yeah, they certainly can. Now, Jack Sedgwick will be setting his sights forward. He won't be concentrating on Will Tregurtha, who, again, is another one who has real-world experience. Around here, that's Sedgwick! That's Sedgwick, big mistake! And he's dropped all the way down. He'll have a slowdown penalty from that, and he's dropped behind Leon Penn here.
Yeah, just carried a little bit too much speed in towards the Britain chicane. Skipped over the curb as well, sent him out into the grass, and like you said, that is a slowdown penalty. Luckily, you know, he can get the majority of that served down the straight as drivers were streaming through on him on driver's right-hand side. We'll have another look at it. You see the slight overcommitment there, little too much speed, spits him on the curve, spits him out wide, and loses all those positions as well. Cedric down to P11.
It was the bounce off the curb, that first left-hand curb. You really do take a lot of that left-hand curb to straighten it up as much as possible and to open up that right-hander of the Britain's chicane. And it just took a little bit too much. It unsettled the car, and that meant that he just had to bail out of of trying to go through the right of Britons. But now Will Tregurtha is under some serious pressure from behind by Jamie Moon.
Really is. Jamie Moon getting a bit of a run of speed on the way in towards Island Bend here, but unless you can carry all that momentum through Island Bend, you're not going to have any opportunity in towards turn 5 hairpin. But the thing is, even then, it's a tricky place to overtake because the corner is on camber, it's banked, so you can carry some speed through there. You can't really stick one down the inside as Jamie Moon, look how close he got to the rear bumper of Will Tregurtha through the Britain chicane. Now across Hilltop, still not much of a run for Jamie Moon. In fact, he might get threatened here by M.Emery. M.Emery sending one down the inside at his slops, and he's got it done. That's a great move from the 34.
I didn't think that M.Emery was going to get that car stopped there. He was in there committed and really went into that. Got a couple of wheels onto the grass part way through his slops, but my goodness, managed to woe up his horses, that's for sure. But yeah, that came from Britons because Moon, he committed, he was too close through the right-hander to get the run out of Britons, as these two still side by side, but they should sort themselves out of Lodge, which they do. But yeah, he was too close through the right-hander to Will Tregurtha. He had to just back out a little bit just to compromise himself, and that allowed the run for Emery. Sedgwick, meanwhile, says bye-bye to Leon Penn. Oh, no, it's Blair Mann,
yeah,
sorry.
Blair Mann. And Emery and Moon are continuing to scrap it out here as well. A little bit further down the road, up and Huns are available for Jamie Moon to squeeze back by on Emery, out of the Cascades in towards the Island Bend. This is fantastic action just inside the top 10 here. Emery loses the position again, so that's the swap done in towards turn number 5. And it's, look at it, what it's done to the rest of the field behind them. It's just sort of stacked them all up as they're unable to settle their differences at the moment. More third parties can get themselves in on this one, and it could have the potential to get it a little bit messier, shall we say. As down the inside.
Yeah, he's made the move. It's compromised him though. And look, Josh Thompson's getting involved here. Pete Berriman's lost a position because of his teammate making a lunge at Graham Carroll.
Incredible. Josh Thompson, the opportunistic move to squeeze by on Peter Berryman. That was fantastic stuff there from the number 51. And, well, Peter Berryman's going to be very, very frustrated at that one. But, you know, you can't really get too frustrated at your teammate, otherwise you lose that team cohesion. But still, that is one that you can't afford to lose. Every point matters in this championship. I know Peter Berriman's a bit adrift of the top runners in terms of the standings because of the bad luck he's had so far this season, but there's still enough rounds left, still enough races left for him to try and recover a championship challenge. But with something like that happening, yes, it is only a handful of points, but it could certainly matter.
Certainly can. You're absolutely right that every point counts. And Thompson, you know, when he's in the mood, he is one of the best racers out there. But he's got to be in that right frame of mind and really have that bit between his teeth. And he looks to be in that sort of attitude here today. He made that position up at the start, up into 5th, and then taking the opportunity when it arises. That's what you've got to do around here. And you could see how one move from somebody in front could compromise you at the end of a series of corners around this track. So it's great to see this action here, and shows what we know about the fine overtaking around here.
Yeah, it seems like if you're brave enough, you can certainly get it done. And obviously, you can capitalize on mistakes ahead of you, no problem whatsoever either. So complexion this race a little bit because we've got Kevin Ellis Jr. He doesn't have a friend behind him anymore. He's got Josh Thompson, and that can be quite scary on some occasions because Thompson's certainly not afraid to get himself stuck into trying to get past cars ahead of him. He's a very, very aggressive driver indeed. A lot of the time it comes back to bite him. I'm pretty sure you'll say that as well, Paul. But it's certainly not the car that you want to see in your wing mirrors.
No, certainly not. I mean, I will say, me and Josh, every time that we've raced, it's always been hard but fair racing. You know, he will push you to the very limit of the track, and you know he will squeeze you and put you in a position that you don't necessarily want to be. But if you're fair with him, he's fair with you. He's one of those types of drivers, and if you start trying to play a bit silly with him, well, he will be silly back with you as well. So he is a racer at heart, though, is Josh, and well, he's not got it easy though, because now Pete Berryman seems to be on one. He's having a look here. That's going to be a tricky move to make stick. Thompson, yeah, there you go. You see, it's so difficult. And Will Chadwick was sniffing around then. Yeah,
it seems like the plan of action is to get it done late braking on the way in towards Hislops, and just to force the driver to back out of it. We're seeing with Will Chadwick, well, like you said, Paul, he gained a whole bunch of advantage out of that. Look at the speed to the corner, though. Oh, slow down penalty. Oh no, that's all come unraveled, and Chadwick gets the free spot.
Well, where on earth has he picked up a slow down penalty? I'm not seeing anything, unless he's got some sort of issue with his setup or something. I mean, I saw this yesterday with the driver having the gears getting stuck in fourth gear. Will Tregerthen, by the way, has got Jamie Moon all over the back of him. There's action all over here in this series.
Yeah, this is incredible. I'm not sure what happened there to Peter Berryman. Whatever the issue was, whether it was a slowdown penalty or technical issue or whatever it was, it just seemed to sort itself out.
I know what it is. He's gaming the system. He wants pole position for the second race.
Ah, you crafty man, Peter Berryman. Crafty. But yeah, that could be it, as we see this duo of Will Tregerthen and Jamie Moon head their way through the hairpin. Jamie Moon, well, he's got himself within basically just a handful of tenths of a second here. If he gets a good run coming out of Britain's, then certainly the move is available on the way into Hislops again, but you still have to be super brave to send it on the brakes into there. You decide to remain in line for now, but you know, we still got less than 10, well, we got just less than 10 minutes of this race to go, so it's still a good handful of laps. It feels like we're almost at the end of the race already when we're not.
Yeah, we should be about 6 laps remaining when we finish this one. But yeah, the problem with the move into Hislops is you pretty much have to have it done and dusted going into the right-hander at Hislops, because we've seen too many times when they go side by side, when you get to the left, you just get hung out to dry if you're still alongside. So you have to get it done and completed going into Hislops rather than trying to get it done all the way through. Moon, late move to the inside for Old Hall, and through he goes. Tregerthen's not fighting that one too hard. I think he was just trying to avoid any incident at Old Hall.
Yeah, Emery and Cedric are fighting it out behind as well. Down Cascades they go. So lots of places to look at if you want to see some close action here in the last half of this first race at Oulton Park. Of course, round number 7 of the championship is this one, and we've had some great action. But again, I want to go back to this because that is strategic for Pierre Berryman, it seems. He wants that reverse sprint pole position. It does mean that Will Chadwick, of course, gains a couple of points in this race. Berryman loses a couple of points. However, it seems like Berryman thinks that the calculations will work in his favour, and he can get a better finish in the second race by finishing in pole position more than he would by losing the one place to go down the second.
Well, that's it. Don't forget, it is 25 points for a win. Where he was in 5th place, it's 12. For 6th place, it's 10. So, I mean, 2 points difference there. If you're able to start on pole, get a good launch and get away from everybody, you run to a bigger haul of points there, whereas you're not guaranteed. I mean, you're not guaranteed to lead if you start on pole position. Let's not think about the bush, because we've seen some of the best sim racers in the world not get a terrible start in this car. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Could get a bad launch and others swamp him. So it's a ploy, and we've seen people do it in real world racing as well. So don't think this is just a feature of sim racing.
Yeah, it could well be, and yeah, this is, we'll have to see, because usually in some series you're not actually allowed to do that. It's like freely give up the position just so that you can start on reverse grid pole position. I don't have the rule book to hand to be able to tell that. I do have the driver's book, I'm just trying to find the rule book right now to just a double check. But yeah, either way, you know, if this is completely above board, then Merriman is totally allowed to do it. And well, we'll see how it works out for him in race 2, because like you said, it could all unravel on that initial start if he's not able to get away.
Certainly could, but yeah, definitely. But it gives you more of an advantage, though, especially around here. I mean, Job has got a nice, comfortable lead right now. It's Carroll and Ellis Jr., the battle of the Scots. Blair Mann's just dropped down a couple of positions on our timing screen, so in fact he is dropping down positions. Oh, that's why he's off the track at Knickebrook.
Yeah, that's not ideal, as he rejoins into the big set of trucks and car passes the left-hand side. But let's see what happens to Blair Mann. Looks like a solo car incident.
Is he just going to clip the grass?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can very easily happen here in iRacing in these cars as well. So a little bit of an embarrassing one there for Blair Mann, losing a good couple of spots as a result. But let's have a look back, because M.Emery all over the place, as Jack Cedric also involved in this one as well, as he goes out into the grass and takes the spin as well. Jack Cedric falling down the order. These guys were fighting tooth and nail for that position for basically the last 10 to 15 minutes, but it's all come undone, and Cedric out into the grass, rejoining in 15.
Emery lost some positions as well, ended up forcing wide. That slight bit of side-to-side contact unsettled Emery, and it just could not get it stopped. So they both went off there, but Cedric, the one who's come off worst from that incident, and Jack is just not getting any luck in this race at all, is he?
Yeah, it simply doesn't seem to be the case, as that number 10 car falling down the order from 15. That is still 1 point. MP15 still in a point scoring position, but not as many as Cedric would have hoped for coming towards the end of race 1 here at Oulton Park. So let's have a look then, because that's towards the front. We've got ourselves Kevin Ellis Jr. and Graham Powell. We'll have a look at a replay of exactly what happened between Cedric and Emery. Yeah, it's Emery got a little bit unsettled coming out of the Old Hall corner. A little bit of door-to-door contact, like you said, Paul. Smacked the car out onto the grass, and Cedric, you know, coming off the worst in that one. But in a way, I think that was starting to show signs of happening with how hard they were fighting earlier.
At the end of the day, that's a racing incident in my eye. You know, it's just it's some hard racing, and unfortunately, that incident happened. It happens in motorsport. You know, not every incident has to have somebody at fault, and I think that was one of those cases of just a racing incident there. But looking to the front here, Job has actually is either managing himself at the front here, or just driving with himself a little bit, or Graham Carroll has been absolutely on one, because Carroll has caught that gap up a little bit here towards the end of the race, and we're about 2.5 laps remaining in this one. So Kevin Ellis Jr. I think is pushing Carroll all the way here.
Yeah, I think so too. The last couple of laps of this race will be very, very telling indeed. Whether or not Kevin Ellis Jr. can get himself through and Graham Carroll gain a couple of extra points, that will help him out a lot in terms of the championship picture coming out of the day. Of course, this is the last round of the first half of the season, so it'll be good to get yourself a good foothold to be able to complete the second half. Graham Carroll trying to put up the defense to Kevin Ellis Jr. See Kevin laser focused on those screens ahead of him. Of course, he's going to be in the Apex Racing Team facility in Corby, where they have all those sim rigs set up, and they have some pretty fancy equipment. Of course, that's all going to be helping a little bit. And of course, you know, it does. You know, sometimes the situation calls for a little bit better equipment. So it's better pedals, better wheel. It does make you a little bit faster, but only if you're kind of fast already, and it makes you more consistent.
Yeah, certainly does. And to the grass! Oh, Ellis Jr., can he keep it out the wall? Yes, he can, but that's going to drop him down positions here. Oh, one little mistake around this track. It's an old school track. It will punish you.
I don't know whether I've cursed him there or not by saying the better equipment helps out, but Ellis Jr. That was a crucial mistake, pushing a little bit too hard in the final laps of this race, trying to chase down Carroll, and now, even worse, he's not going to benefit any from reverse grid because he's down in 9th.
Well, I think what it is because he was running so close to Graham Carroll, it can obscure your view of the track, the side of the track there, and you don't know exactly where your car is, and just one little wheel, one little bit of the wheel on the grass as you're going into the island bend. I mean, it's a fast corner, his island bend as well, on the exit there. And he's done incredibly well to keep that car out the wall. That is a brilliant recovery from it.
Yeah, it really is. And, well, maybe, just maybe, there'll be a couple of extra points at the end of this because he's following quite close to the back of Leon Penn. And, of course, Penn being from Porsche Esports, well, completely different team, not going to let him through that easily. So, yes, they are similar liveries, the Apex and the Pure Sims cars. That's why I was initially confused, but yeah, we'll have to see back there whether or not Kevin Alstrioni can get himself up into P8 or not. But it does mean, though, Sebastian Joe, clean run to the finish, you would have thought. 9/10 of a second back to his teammate of Graham Carroll. It's been a very, very comfortable race. The gap has been coming down and up over the course of the race, but I think element of Sebastian just trying to manage the situation to the cars behind him. 30 seconds left on the clock, of course, and Sebastian Jobs should come across the line as our race 1 winner at Oulton Park.
Well, given what we've just seen with Ellis Jr., we're not saying anything here, but no, he's been just absolutely the class of the field for me in this first race, and even in qualifying as well. Ellis Jr.'s made it past Penn, it must be said, so he's gained 1 place back. He's not going to get any more than that. But yeah, Joe, just a tremendous drive. We've barely mentioned him all race long, and he's been superb at the front.
Absolutely. The Oracle Red Bull Racing Esports car heads its way through the final corner of Lodge, up the hill, and Sebastian Job will take the race 1 win here at Oulton Park in the Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Great Britain. And it's a Red Bull Racing Esports 1-2 as well, as Carroll finishes second. Here's the fight going on deeper in the pack between Dane Baird and Jack Sedgwick. This is the battle for a pittance of points, but Jack Sedgwick has been able to make the pass happen and disposes of Dane Baird. Gets to the line there in P14. So that's a recovery there from Jack Sedgwick after issues early on. But yeah, what an intriguing race.
That was fantastic. I thought that was a really, really enjoyable race, and it just goes to show with this track as well, one little mistake and it costs you big.
It does. Tell that to Kevin Ellis Jr. But it is Sebastian Job that takes the race win here today. A race win that he so desperately needed as far as the championship is concerned. Graham Carroll with a great result in P2. Josh Thompson P3 with Will Chadwick in P4. Pierre Berryman P5. So at the end of everything, trying to pull off the crafty move to try and get reverse grid pole position. Because of his teammate basically almost binning it, it means that now Jamie Moon is our reverse grid pole position sitter. So that changes that one somewhat. So the plan hasn't quite worked out as far as Pierre Berryman is concerned there. Will Tregertha missing out on a reverse grid pole position with Kevin Ellis Jr. Well, he will have to start from P8 now in the second race of the afternoon. Leon Penn will start, will finish in 9th, and will start the second race in 9th place with M.Emery in 10th. So that's the top 10 then. We'll look a little bit further back. We've got Thomas Cope, Brandon Blakesley, Daniel McCauley, Jack Sedgwick, Dane Baird rounding out the top 15 and the points paying positions. Those drivers outside of the points, Craig Williams, Blair Mann, Lewis Ward and Daniel McDonald. The last two there are retirements from the race. So that's race 1 over and done with here at Oulton Park. We're just a couple of minutes away from getting our gridding procedure underway for race 2 here at Oulton. That's going to be round number 8 of the championship. And well, this reverse grid's certainly going to spice things up here, Paul. Jamie Moon on pole position with Peter Berryman also on that front row. This one has the potential for a lot of chaotic moments and a bit of spice.
It certainly does, but speaking of chaotic moments, this is what happened to Lewis Ward, who tried to thread the needle there and it didn't quite work out and collected his teammate out of all of that. But yeah, it's really, it's a case of this track. you can make overtakes. We've seen them in that first race. It's how difficult it is to make those overtakes, though, is what sets this track apart from pretty much any other.
Tell you what, that incident with Lewis Ward in the real world would probably have been a red flag, as he would have forced the entire barrier out onto the circuit, and we would have had to stop proceedings to get that moved out of the way. But fortunately, we don't have to do things like that in the virtual world. We'll watch the rest of these highlights run through. That's the move down the inside there from the number 98 machine of Kevin Ellis Jr. That was his first attempt at Graham Carroll. And, well, it was unsuccessful, and it caused the lost position there for his teammate of Peter Berryman, with Josh Thompson getting himself up into that spot.
Yeah, Thompson taking advantage of the situation, and it really worked out for him there. And, you know, so we see Blair Mann, he was sort of there or therearound in the mid-pack, and had a solid race, nothing spectacular for him, and certainly we saw some great action though, especially down at the Hislop chicane. There's the spin that Mann had towards the end of the race, and Jack Sedgwick making that attempt on M.Emery. This is one that they'll be having a little discussion with each other about, but you know, at the end of the day, I think it's just a little bit of hard racing, and unfortunately that can sometimes lead to a little bit of door rubbing and ending up out the race. But this, I mean, Kevin Ellis Jr. has done the right thing there, immediately locking up the tyres. That stops the car going forward in motion. It slides sideways. Yes, you can't recover when you lock the tyres like that, but it slides sideways and it keeps you out the barrier. One man who had the job in hand, that was Sebastian Job at the front of the field.
It was Graham Carroll not too far behind either. They will start 7th and 8th. Well, not 7th.
No,
excuse me, 5th and 6th. Yeah, I got my reverse grids the wrong, the reverse grid starting point the wrong way. There we go. But we got ourselves, I would say about 30 seconds before we got ourselves our gridding procedure underway for race number 2. What can those two Red Bull Racing Esports drivers do from P5 and 6 on the starting grid? Let's see if they're able to make the moves early on to be able to get back up into those front spots. And we'll see how that changes as far as championship standings are concerned as well. So drivers getting themselves prepared. We're certainly all prepared. We hope you are at home as well on the RaceBot TV channel, and of course the Porsche Twitch channel as well, as we'll get ourselves our grid set for the second race of the afternoon. Your reverse grid pole position sitter will, of course, be the number 75 car of Jamie Moon. So he'll be starting at the very front of the order here today for our second race. Joining him on the front row of the starting grid will be Peter Berryman. Then we've got William Chadwick in P3, sharing the second row with Josh Thompson. Then we've got our two Red Bull Racing Esports drivers in P5 and P6. They got the 1-2 last race, but they're quote-unquote punished for that by finishing 5th and 6th with the reverse grid. Looking further back, of course, you got Will Tregurtha starting in P8 with Kevin Ellis Jr. starting, well, Will Tregurtha starting P7, Kevin Ellis Jr. in P8. So let's see what Kevin Ellis Jr. can do from there. It's going to be a very, very tough ask to try and get back towards the top of the order for Kevin, but he certainly knows and is capable of the task at hand. Beyond Penn will start in 9th with Matt Emery in P10. We've got Thomas Cope in P11 with Brandon Blakesley starting in 12th for race number 2. Then Daniel McCauley starts in 13th with Jack Sedgwick in 14th. Dane Baird will start in 15th place. Craig Williams will start in 16th with Blair Mann in 17th. Lewis Ward starting in 18th for race 2. And then Daniel McDonald at the very back of the order will start in that 19th and final spot. He will not take the start, apparently, due to the fact that he is not connected to the server. So we will have an 18-car starting grid here for race number 2, Paul. And, well, there's a lot riding on this one, especially if you're Peter Berryman going for the gamble with the reverse grid.
Yeah, and he would have thought, oh, got pole position, that'll do nicely. And then when he sees his teammate at the side of the track, it's, well, at least I'm still front row of the grid, I suppose. You know, that'll be that sort of thinking. But it just goes to show, I said at the end of that race. This track is unforgiving. If you get one little thing wrong, you either find an Armco barrier, you find a tyre wall like Lewis Ward did at the start of the first race, and you know, it's very easy to get things wrong. You know, Blair Mann showed it even at one of the slowest parts of the track, that it's very easy to get a wheel on the grass and send yourself around.
Thank you very much, Mavix, for the huge raid on the Porsche Twitch channel. Thank you very much for that. Hello everyone, we're about to get ourselves our second race underway here in the Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Great Britain here at Oulton Park. This is round number 8, race number 8 of the championship, as drivers getting themselves to the starting grid now. We're about 30 seconds away from getting ourselves, these drivers, on the way down in towards the Old Hall corner for the first time in race number 2. It will be Jamie Moon starting on pole position, with Peter Berryman in second place, Will Chadwick, Josh Thompson, Graham Carroll, Sebastian Job all the way down to P6. Those were your reverse grid effectees. And then we've got Will Chagurtha, everyone finishing in race 1 order further behind. But here we go then, about to get ourselves started for race number 2 at Oulton Park. Those engine notes will rise in those Porsches, and we're off the way down towards Old Hall corner. It's a terrible start from Jamie Moon as he gets swamped up by the field. It was a monster start from William Chadwick as well, as he gets to the outside of turn number 1, out into the grass though. Careful with the track limits. Josh Thompson has a runner speed down Cascades now. He might be able to get himself up into P2 from P4 on the starting grid, and he has great start there from Josh Thompson, and it's super important for Peter Berryman to get that race lead early on. He leads them around for now, as Graham Carroll already looking to try and make moves in towards the hairpin, as now Kevin Ellis Jr., big move to the outside of Joe.
Yeah, that's a great start for Ellis Jr. 8th up to 6th already in this race, so 2 positions gained. But yeah, you called it, an awful start from pole position for Jamie Moon. Looked like he just cooked his clutch, and that meant he got a slow getaway. But as a plunge down towards Hislops for the first time in this second race, M.Emery looking to make some moves into Hislops. But yeah, this is a really, really exciting opening part of this lap.
Incredible as we head our way through towards the final sector of the lap, of course. On the way in towards Druids Corner for the front of the field at least, as everyone's strung out single file. As Josh Thompson is driving like a man possessed at the moment. He's already caught up with the little gap that was developed between P1 and P2. So Berryman has to have his wits about him here in this situation. We're continuing to track the progress of Kevin Ellis Jr. as well. Like you said, he had a fantastic start from P8. He's up at the P6 already, and now has his main championship competitors ahead of him to try and overtake it. He's hoping they get backed up behind Will Chadwick.
Yeah, and Chadwick has shown that he's got the pace of these front drivers this round. So, you know, it won't be a gimme for Graham Carroll or Sebastian Job and et al., but certainly they're going to have to work hard to try and get past Will Chadwick, and that's exactly what Kevin Ellis Jr. wants. He wants to see these guys struggling to give himself a great opportunity to move ahead of the Red Bull cars.
He does, he really does. So Blairman's around again in the number 99 car, and is he reached a little bit? No, he's just going to take the toe back towards pit lane. What has happened here with Blairman? Is it an incident with someone else? Is it just a solo car incident? That's always the guess that we have to make here in this situation. Sweeping through the Island 10, and of course down in towards contact with Dane Baird on the outside.
That was a little bit clumsy there, was that one. A bit of a late lunge and down the inside, and you're always going to unsettle the car when you throw it down the inside there. And yeah, Blairman decides that, yeah, that's the end of my day. Will Chagurtha putting the move on Jamie Moon, but Moon's holding on to that 7th place for the time being. But Chagurtha is showing that he means business as well in this second race. He wants to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Drivers feeling that this second race is a very good opportunity for them to be able to improve position, because the front of the field typically gets stacked up behind the slower traffic that starts ahead of them. So everyone just sort of bunches up a little bit more and that's a prime overtaking opportunity for everyone in this train. But everything's still strung out single file at the moment, but everything can change just in a millisecond here in these sorts of races. We're seeing Jamie Moon, of course, he got the poor start off of the reverse grip pole position. I think that's just maybe a little bit of nerves and a little bit surprised that he was even in that situation.
Yeah, but you spend so much of time in these cars, as these drivers will, that they'll know what it's like to launch one of these cars off of the grid. So I think it's not so much nerves. I think it was just a case of just didn't quite get the bike point right on the clutch and really cooked it. That meant that he got a terrible getaway, and everybody else, I mean, great reactions from everybody else to avoid him as well, because it is a narrow grid here at Oulton Park, and over the years there's been many incident happen through in towards Old Hall.
Have been. Thankfully, this time around, we didn't quite see it. The most major thing that we saw through turn number 1 on the first lap was just Will Chadwick pushing all the way wide, almost out into the grass. But thankfully, he was able to gather it all up and remained in P3. Am I getting a bit of deja vu here, Paul? Because it's Jack Sedgwick and Blair Mann again on the way down in towards Cascades.
Matt Emery.
Matt Emery.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a different Telesport car.
Well, Blair Mann's in Pearson's car, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yes. I got my drivers mixed up. I'm so sorry.
We all have those days, don't worry about it. It's live. It's live broadcasting, that's what you get. But yeah, these two, they've been together pretty much since the last race. Now, they're getting caught up behind Cope here as well, so Emery will want to try and get a move done, but Jack Sedgwick, he'll be feeling so frustrated here, won't he? Just the way that he's had those couple of incidents in the first race, and then he's found himself having to start further down the field for race number 2, and he's not making the progress that I would imagine that he would be expecting to.
He's just wondering in his head, I've got that red built sport car ahead of me again. Like, what is this? There's like nothing's changed from race 1 in this situation. Hopefully it doesn't end in tears like it did in that first race, and these guys can have themselves a pretty respectful and contact-free fight as we ride on board with Jack Sedgwick on the way through towards the back end of the lap here. They've both got Thomas Cope ahead of them, because Thomas Cope has improved position slightly from P11 up into P10 here in race 2. But for Jack Sedgwick, what's going to be the plan here? Because these guys have been stuck together on the circuit for a long time if we combine the time from race number 1. So certainly they should know each other's in and outs by now. Yeah,
he certainly will know where he's faster than Emery, and Emery will know where to defend from Sedgwick. But the thing for Sedgwick, really, he wants to get the run through Britain's, up over Hilltop and down towards Hislops. That's where he wants to get that right, and don't get too close to the back of that car in front into Britain's here. Get the run through the corner and out, and try and get that up over the hilltop, but he's not quite close enough to make any move yet.
Yeah, just simply not close enough. And yeah, I mean, we still got plenty of time left in this race for us to have these battles start to develop, of course. But the drivers will have to be patient for now. Of course, you're in more of a mode in this portion of the race of just trying to capitalize on any mistakes ahead of you rather than trying to manufacture the passes. But I guess it depends on exactly which situation each driver is in, whether or not they're out of position with regards to their normal race pace. That's what we saw from Kevin Ellis Jr. starting in P8. He had to get those early moves done to have any chance in this race, and now he's trying to focus on locking onto the back of the Red Bull Racing Esports cars ahead of him. Before, for most other drivers, it's just a case of okay, just get these the first 5, 10, 15 minutes in the bag here, and then potentially things might start to develop a little bit more a little later on.
Potentially do, yeah. It's certainly great opportunities for those drivers later on. Of course, if you keep the pressure on the cars in front of you, then you will really push them to make mistakes, which Chadwick doing that usual, as we've seen time and again now in the series, leaning into the corners, as so many drivers do, and Jackson seems to be dropping down the order.
What's happened to Jack? I wonder, as he's now filed out behind Brandon Blakesley. Was there an instant? It was a solo car instant actually, through Island Bends, I believe it was. Just tracked out a little too wide, out into the grass, and had to slam on the anchors to not rejoin in an unsafe fashion. So we'll get a look at it in a bit, but yeah, that could have turned out to be a sketchy situation, especially if there was a car on the inside of the hairpin at the very bottom of the banking.
When it's not your day, it's not your day in this series, isn't it? It's it really doesn't go well for you. Here we go, and Cedric, so he did similar to what Kevin Ellis Jr. did, and then he's pressed the windscreen wiper, he's done everything he can in a mad panic to try and avoid, almost made contact with Blakesley, but able to avoid there. So yeah, just you get that panic mode of no, and you press everything that you can just to try and help slow the car down.
Yeah, so any of these buttons will do something, right? You just got to panic and just try and press everything. But yeah, ideally, the only thing that works here is steering, your brakes, and your throttle. That's the only thing that can get you out of an instant like that one. But with 15 minutes left to go now, I gotta say, Thompson's been doing very well at holding on to this position. Same with Will Chadwick as well. They've got some very potent competitors behind them of Carroll and Job and Ellis Jr., but they haven't been phased whatsoever. They haven't put a foot wrong, and there's not really all that much the Red Bull Racing Esports guys can do in this situation if they're not being gifted those obvious opportunities.
Yeah, you've just got to be patient. You know, patience is a virtue, and certainly in motorsport as well. We've seen it too many times where people make a rash move and try and get themselves past in a quick way, but ends up ending up with a bit of a nightmare. But these drivers, you know, they are some of the best sim racers in the UK. You know, they know what they're doing out there, and they'll be pushing to the very limit all the way through this race. And Sebastian Job, champion from last year, 5th place in this race after winning the opening race. Still not bad points, to be fair. 12 points for 5th, so they're looking good for this.
It will be, and it's especially with that result out of race number 1, it's not not too shabby of a result finishing in P5 in this situation. But Berryman is hoping and praying that he can get to the checkered flag in 1st place, because that will at least be a bit of recovery compared to the last couple of weeks of things here in the Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Great Britain. So he can start to re-establish maybe a little bit of a challenge, a little bit of hope as far as championship is concerned. So we'll have to see how the points work out at the end of the day. He's 1 second ahead of Josh Thompson, so he's starting to break out of that sort of drop zone now.
Just to go back to Sebastian Job, one thing that is crucial for him is that the championship leader coming into this round is behind him. So Kevin Ellis Jr. on that recovery drive after finishing 8th in race 1, he's now behind still Sebastian Job, and Job, if he keeps him behind, that helps him in the championship. It also helps his teammate Graham Carroll as well in the championship.
12.5 minutes left in this one. There's the view of Sebastian Job. It's a little bit of a scrappy lap for Sebastian Job. Kind of lost the back of his teammate here, Graham Carroll. Of course, we saw that a couple of instances in race number 1 where Sebastian Job was leading, and then all of a sudden Carroll was able to catch him up by half a second because of something that may have happened on each individual lap. So it seems like while Sebastian Job does have the pace here, on some of these laps he's not quite as quick as he is capable of, and that is sort of causing these gaps to fluctuate in and out, I get the feeling.
Nature of the track, it really is. You know, you have to get things absolutely spot on lap after lap after lap, and if you get just a wheel on a curve wrong or something like that, it can cost you a couple of tenths per second, and before you know it, you've you've ended up losing out that little bit of time to everybody else. Jamie Moon's done well to recover from his poor start, must be said. Yes, down in 7th place, not where he'd want to be considering he started on pole position, but he has been able to ward off Will Tregurtha and has actually pulled out about a 2-second lead over Will.
Has, and well, it gives Jamie Moon a little bit of breathing space to be able to maybe cause Ellis Jr. a couple of problems. You know, it's even though they're quite far away as far as championship points are concerned, you know, you're sharing a racetrack together. Why not give one of the championship contenders a little bit of a challenge here if you're one of these drivers a little bit further back? You know, you don't often get the opportunity to. Of course, there's a certain element of you not wanting to spoil the championship fight, but the only race that matters is the one on circuit right now.
But here's the thing, you know, and I've said this year after year, you only improve if you race against the best, and to do that, you have to actually take them on in the races, and see if you are able to get one over these drivers. And you know, this, you know, you've got Berryman, you've got Thompson, you've got Carroll, you've got Job, you've got Ellis Jr. They're all, and Jack Cedric as well. 6 of these drivers on the grid are all World Championship drivers. They all drive in the Porsche Esports Super Cup. They're not there by accident. And so if you're able to then race against them, so if you're someone like Will Chadwick, this is an ideal opportunity to see how you stack up against them, and to see where they maybe do things differently and give you hints as to how you can improve.
It's kind of like that feeling you get when you realize you are a very high car number in an official session. It's like, oh, I'm in a higher split than I usually am. So you know, this is going to be a little bit more of a learning experience, I suppose. So racing with drivers that are typically, at least by iRacing, faster than you in those official sessions. So yeah, there's a lot of learning to do, especially given in this series, of course, they are using fixed setups. So there's not any difference in terms of the setups of the cars. Not that there's too much that you can really change on these cars, but it's, you know, just having that as equal. And things getting a little bit sketchy back there, aren't they? Is Will Chadwick looking all over the back of Thompson.
Yeah, you don't want to hit